Howdy, writers. It's Megan Barnhard of Write with Megan, and today's live topic is setting deadlines and finishing writing projects. So, this is going to be full of practical tips and also some kind of big picture, maybe mindset shifts that you can use if you're not a big fan of deadlines. Maybe you feel like Douglas Adams does. I love deadlines. I love that whooshing noise they make as they go past. It's one of my favorite ever author quotes. So if you're not a big fan of deadlines, hopefully this will help you see why they're really beneficial for writers. If you want to be setting deadlines, but you're not sure how to do it, we're going to get into some practical tips and do that. So that's what to expect from today. Hey, Dave. Hey, Rachel. If you're watching, please jump into the chat and say hello. Let me know your questions, comments, thoughts about deadlines, and I will get us shared in the Write with Megan Facebook group. If you're not already a member over there, I invite you to come join. This is a place where authors, bloggers, people writing for their business, hobbyists, writing enthusiasts, anybody who's interested in writing is welcome. And we talk about writing and share thoughts and ideas. And if you want to be getting more writing done, my best recommendation for you is to hang out with other people who are writing, because it's just going to feel like a normal thing to do, right? It's like if you want to be able to run marathons, hang out with other marathon runners. So if you want to write, come hang out with writers. And if you're leaving comments in the Write with Megan Facebook group, I'm going to hopefully catch those. But often there's a little bit of a delay. So if you watch from the Write with Megan Facebook page, then I'll definitely see what you are commenting about. Hello, Diane. Hi, Danny. Okay. Hi, Holly. Ooh, I like the tone we're starting with. Dave says, sometimes I write best when under constraints. I have so many thoughts about that. I always write best when under some form of constraint. And that might look like time. I have to finish by a certain time. It might look like the amount of time I have. Like I've only got 25 minutes and I want to get some writing done. Constraints might also look like structure I'm writing to. Yeah, I love writing constraints. Otherwise, what happens to me, my experience is there's infinite choice. And I find that very overwhelming. All right, so first I want to talk about why deadlines. Why should you write with a deadline? And I'll let you know that the reason I'm talking about this is because this is a question somebody posed when coming into the Write with Megan Facebook group. You know, how can I set deadlines? So I know this is something some of you want to do, but if you're like, deadlines, that's, you know, deadlines are for work projects, writing is fun, I would encourage you to set some deadlines. And I'll talk about how to do that. But the reason I would encourage you to set deadlines is, one, you're busy. You have other things that you need to do in your life. You need to put food on the table. You need to take care of other people. You need to do so many of the things. And it's rare. It's never happened in my life. And I'm like, oh, look, extra time. It's not like you sit on your couch and you reach between the cushions and you're like 3 times and an extra hour. This doesn't happen in our lives. There is always something that fills the time. And if you want to make writing a priority, you need to dedicate time to it. You need to create time that is specifically set aside for your writing. And the easiest way to do that is to have a deadline, right? Because otherwise it's, well, why now as opposed to later? You're also going to make procrastination seem slightly less attractive if you have a deadline, because when we just have that sense of, oh, I want to get this done, well, yeah, I could do it now, or I could do something else now, but, oh, I want to get this done, and oh man, I'm trying to get it done by next Tuesday, then it lights a little bit of a fire under us. So I'm wondering if you guys relate to that. Do you relate to deadlines helping you carve out the time in the first place for your writing? If you know you want to get something done by a certain date, does having a deadline actually help you stick to it? And does it help you procrastinate a little bit less? The next reason for having a deadline is actually my favorite reason, but I'm curious what you guys say. Oh, Danny. Yeah. Danny, this is the best reason in my opinion to have a deadline. Okay, so Danny says, my best motivator is to set a pre-order knowing Amazon will gank that option if I fail to deliver. Also massively public deadline. right? Creating something in your writing project that has, I was going to say repercussions, but that's not the right word. That has, oh man, that's connected to things going on in the world outside of you. So a pre-order on Amazon, or saying to an editor you hire, hey, I'm going to get you a draft by this date, or saying to your critique buddies and your writing buddies, hey, I'm going to have this chapter ready for you to read by this date. Creating that external accountability is hugely motivating. And that's something you can play with, because you want it to be something you can actually meet. So like Danny has already published several books, so she knows what her process looks like, right? So for her to put up a pre-order for a book, it's not like she's going to get to a point and go, oh man, I didn't know that in order to get this book up for pre-order, I had to, slay a giant lizard. She already knows what's involved because she's done that. So I would recommend, if you're using the pre-order, make sure you've done your research first and you know exactly what's involved, because you don't want to get stuck in that position of, man, I worked in good faith to meet this deadline, but I don't have a giant lizard slaying sword and I'm going to have to order one on Amazon and it takes a few days to arrive, so I'll be behind my deadline. But that, in my opinion, is the best reason to set a deadline, because you create your writing project as something real in the world. So let's look at what that could be. Could be setting up the pre-order. I mentioned you could say, connect with an editor. You could connect with critique buddies. If you are setting deadlines for writing for your business, you could just have like the deadline you're going to set for when you'll have a blog post that gets published, and look at your content calendar and go, well, when am I going to promote that on Facebook? And that's the deadline I'm giving myself. And then even though it's internal, it's just you working on things, that when you hit that deadline, you get this real result in the world. Hugely motivating. Dave says, without deadlines, I get a lot of housework done. I absolutely feel that. It's the clean toilet syndrome. No, that's not what I do if I procrastinate. I just do a lot of laundry. Yeah, there's not that extra time. We never go, oh, all the stuff is done. I have extra time. That's why it's so important to the deadline. Hey, Lloyd, speaking of editors, you could tell you're getting a draft too. And Holly says, I can write a fan fiction novella monthly if I'm motivated, but it's that 1,000 views for posting it. I can't resist. Ooh, that's awesome. So you know exactly what the benefit is, it sounds like, you're getting when you post, and you get to look forward to that. So that's something you can do artificially as well. Like, that's a natural consequence, is if you post, then people view it, and that feels really good and exciting. But you could also set up deals with yourself. Like, if I, finish this chapter by that date, or if I post this blog by that date, I get to buy myself new pens. I don't know if that's motivating for y'all, but for me, that is like, that's some pretty good bribery right there. New pens, new notebooks, new Post-its. All right. Yeah. And the other thing I'd add, in addition to the motivation, is that there's a practical point, right? So if you have those deadlines, it allows you to map out the whole project with other people. And then you can talk to that editor, and you can talk to that cover designer, or you can talk to the person who's going to do graphic design for your website, because you're going to have the content built by a certain time and it'll be ready to go out. So any more reasons we missed why it's really motivating to have a deadline, or what's so great about having a deadline? I mean, the biggest one is so you actually finish. That's, I think, the biggest reason to have a deadline, so you actually finish. That's to me what makes a huge difference, to know that I'll actually get writing done instead of just thinking about getting writing done. So I encourage you. Rachel said, I like the idea of setting goals for motivation. I am a big fan of sticker charts or spreadsheets where you write done in all caps and in bold, and then fill in the cell with some exciting colors, so when you're done, you get that reward. And all of that is motivating in the moment, but what that's doing for your writing habit is also really powerful. You're oh gosh, you're doing so many wonderful things. Every time you finish a writing project, you are showing yourself that you have what it takes to finish a writing project. So if you find yourself in that situation of doubt, of frustration, of, oh, I write, but I never publish, change that thought pattern in your mind, change that script, reframe it as, I am a finisher, I am a closer, I am somebody who finishes things, and it feels great. You'll set up a positive association with your writing because it just feels good to have things done, to have them out of your to-do list. So instead of thinking about writing projects going, oh, I've got to do that, you'll start to have like a positive energy vibration. Was that woo enough? You'll start to feel good feels when you think about writing, because your brain remembers like, oh yeah, we finished that and we got a nice endorphin boost. Yeah, accountability, I love it. Danny says, bullet journal is good for motivation, at least in my experience. Made a list of all the stuff I've produced since I started in August, and it made me feel awesome. Ooh, I love that. I personally love to bullet journal. I don't use it for my writing as much. I use it more for just the kind of larger business goals. But I have recently started using a spreadsheet. It's so weird to me that I love spreadsheets because I don't feel like I'm a naturally organized person, but I kind of think that's why I love spreadsheets, because otherwise thoughts just go everywhere and spreadsheets hold them nicely in one place. And I just started one that was recommended to me by a business coach, and it's like a way to track your wins. And it feels so amazing to look at how many blog posts have I published, and how many Facebook Lives have I done, and how many people have I connected with, and how many books have I published, and how much have I made in royalties. Like, tracking all of that stuff is hugely motivating. So that's kind of a side, that's a tangent more about motivation than deadlines, but yeah, I love that idea. Okay. Joanne, I use a spreadsheet because I feel like it takes my thoughts that otherwise are spread out really big and puts them into one page that I can view. Also, I like I like having things digital because I might drop a link to a Google Doc, so if I'm working on a blog post and I'll start a draft in a Google Doc, then I can link to it from the spreadsheet so that everything I want is in one space. So I like it for that reason. All right, so now let's talk turkey. How? My first post-it was why a deadline. My second post-it is how a deadline. Okay. So any type of deadline you're building for any type of project has to balance your life with what it looks like to get this project done. So if you start planning a deadline only from one of those points of view, it will usually end in your project not getting done. That's my experience. So I've definitely gone through times where I was really overeager. Like, I am going to get this done and I am going to be a rock star about it. And I'll create a deadline that's based on the project that does not incorporate my life. And then I'll get to that week where I have 2 board meetings in one day and I like need to, do all of this stuff to make the rest of life go, and realize, oh, this was a totally unrealistic plan. It feels really cruddy. I hate when that happens. And then I've also done planning where I give what's going on in life too much focus. And I go, oh, well, it won't be a good time to write then because I'll be whatever. Well, maybe you need to postpone that. Maybe I set up too many different, networking that was absolute perfect timing for my phone to interrupt me as I'm saying, maybe I set up too many things in my life. So you might need to clear some things on your schedule. You might need to ask somebody else in your household to chip in more with keeping things clean or putting dinner on the table. You might need to say to friends, hey, it's not that I don't like you, but I'm going to be taking some time and really working on my writing, so I'm not going to be as available for fun stuff we like to do. It might mean you leave dirty dishes in the sink for a while and it's not the end of the world. So you will have to negotiate. You don't want to give too much emphasis to just life. So a good deadline, again, is about that balance. What's going on in your life that's kind of non-negotiable, but then also what are the steps for this project that need to get done? Having a deadline that comes up too soon, I find very unmotivating because at a certain point, I realize I'm not going to meet it. And it's like, meh, whatever, and that's the Douglas Adams quote about the deadline's whooshing past you. You're like, oh, it's nice that you think I'm going to get you my book by then, but not going to happen. And deadlines that are too far out, I also find not motivating, because it's like, well, why work on it now? You know, I've got ages. I've got so much time until that time creeps up on you. Pablo says, deadlines start with dead for a reason. I can attest for one time it actually worked for me. But I've countless times it actually made me burn and crash out of pure anxiety. Last time was actually NaNoWriMo. Oh, Pablo, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm so glad you brought that up, because a good deadline will look different for you than it will look for another writer. And it is vital that you find what feels good for you. And I'm hearing you say maybe deadlines at all don't work, and that might be that might just be what works for you as a writer. So I don't think I can say that deadlines always work for everybody, but I think you can make them work. I think it's much more motivating to work with a deadline, depending on the kind of writing you're doing. If you feel like you're in a place where you need to reinvigorate your creativity, where you are writing for play and pleasure and to kind of make friends with your inner muse, that's not a project you need a deadline for. So this is more the conversation about if you have a writing project and you want to complete it, that's where a deadline is helpful, but it has to respect how you feel about deadlines, how you work as a writer. It has to be really personalized for you. And Dave is suggesting maybe if you tried smaller deadlines. And for what it's worth, I totally burnt out. I did my first NaNoWriMo this last year. I completely burned out. I used every strategy and skill that I have to make it not feel like a grind. And it still, for a lot of days, felt like a grind. I don't think it's my jam. But I also don't write a lot of fiction. I write mostly nonfiction. And so I really set myself up with a huge challenge, because I went, here I am as somebody who rarely writes fiction, who had the longest fiction I'd written up to that point was like 12,000 words. So yeah, I bit off a lot for that. Holly says, deadlines are great for those that can meet them. Folks with anxiety may not be able to handle them. So let's talk about different ways to build deadlines. This is actually a great segue into that. So what if we rethink the word deadline, instead of as something, a date that's imposed out here and we have to meet it? What if we just talk about, or maybe we can let go of using the term deadline. Let's just talk about finishing a project and what that could look like. So for some of you, maybe it'll be like, screw deadlines. I'm not going to pick that date out on the calendar and work backwards and see what I need to do. What you can still do, though, to finish your writing projects is get very, very clear on the steps. Get very, very clear on the steps. I find that one of the times I really procrastinate, and one of the times I feel like I have writer's block, and one of the times, or like the cause of procrastination, feeling like I have writer's block and not doing tasks, is that I simply don't know what the next task would be. So wipe out the concept of deadlines and just say to yourself, what needs to get done for this project to be completed? And start making lists. And you might not have a master list. You might not go from where you are now to finishing, because that can feel overwhelming as well. And if you are prone to anxiety, I would say smaller snapshots are probably more useful, where you're going, okay, well, right now, I have, three more chapters that I want to draft before I'm done with the first half of my novel. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then you might get to a place where you go, oh, well, I have, a first draft, and now I'm going to go into my revisions. And having that list can help keep you on track so that you know what you're going to do next. And that will still be motivating, and it will still be a way to divert the procrastination, because when you sit down to work on a project, you go, oh, these are the things I need to do. So you'll know what needs to come next. Also, if you find yourself going, oh, I'll just write later, you're not choosing between the abstract idea of writing your project and whatever else activity it is. You're choosing between the very concrete, like go back and revise for tone and point of view versus doing something else. For me, definitely the more concrete a task is, the more motivated I feel to do it. Unless it's a hard task, in which case I might need to bribe myself extra with dried mango or trail mix. But that still allows me to know when I'm complete with that. So for those of you who are feeling like, try deadlines, it really doesn't work for me, I'd love to hear, how would it feel if you didn't have an endpoint, but if you had a list of what needed to get done so you knew how to move forward and you knew where you were in the project? Holly's saying she has to barter with her muse. Oh, that's a very funny image. Danny says, setting a daily word count goal helps me when I'm getting discouraged. I can also trick myself with word sprints in games like For the Words. Yeah, I haven't used For the Words, but it sounds like a super cool website. I'm very motivated by 750 words. For daily writing, like they have monthly, they have a challenge every month, and it's just write at least 750 words every day for a month. And I'm like, I don't want to lose the challenge. I don't want to go on the wall of shame. So I will get in there and write. Okay. Holly's saying software like YWriter or Scrivener can help. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a little bit lost as to where I am, but that's okay. So how about this? If you are on board with the notion of deadlines, my favorite go-to that's free is go to any site online that has free printable PDF calendar pages, and just print out calendar pages for the next couple months and start putting in what's going on in your life, what are the next steps that have to happen in your project, and use pencil because you're going to go back and erase and negotiate and what could go where. It's kind of puzzle pieces. Know that most deadlines end up getting moved, and that's okay, but the deadline is there to make sure that it doesn't go on without end. So if you're into a deadline, that's a really easy way to set one up. If you're not into a deadline, try that idea of just writing down the steps that come next. This might be something that you find motivating. Well, let me say more about that. The steps that come next. How do I do that? Well, use some kind of writing recipe. If you're writing a blog post, hit me up. I've got tons of blog post recipes. You can find them on my website, meganbarnhart.com. If you're writing novels, I've got tons of recipes for how to outline. I've got a whole book on it, recipe for outlining. Maybe you know exactly what you want to have in your writing project, whether it's a poem or a short story or a novel or a blog post. Get that plan out on paper, put it on Post-it notes, put it wherever, so that you can see really clearly, all right, these are the steps I need to go through in order to be finished. So whether you're using an end date or not, you're like, well, this is how much there is left to be finished. And I think that's actually something very powerful to do for our anxious brains, because we can, when we're going to bed at night and our brains are like, but I didn't do this. Instead you go, but brain, you did do 1, 2, and 3. You checked them off, and you know how many. There's not an infinite number left. You know exactly how many steps there are left. You'll totally do those. It's fine. Take your time. You can talk to your anxious brain that way. If you need like mapped out steps for what it looks like to publish, there's actually in Recipe for Drafting, I take you through a whole, in chapter 3, it's about becoming a writing project manager. And there's a lot about deadlines in here, and questions like, when do you want to publish? How long before that do you want to send advanced copies to readers so they can get a sneak peek and leave you a review? How long will your editor need with the final manuscript? How long will you need for your revisions? How long do you need to give beta readers? How long do you need to give beta readers so that they can read and comment? How long will it take you to revise? So it's like working backwards and making a plan. And if you, again, if deadlines resonate with you, then you can use those questions to create your sub deadlines. If you're like, this is all too overwhelming to put an end date on it, you can work from the other way and go, okay, these are the things I need to do. So as long as I'm sticking with, this part of the project and getting through all the steps there, then I know I'm good to go. And then it goes into like a kind of breakdown, a sample of how long it could take for all those things to happen that you can use to kind of get your writing plan started. So here's how we can summarize it. Here's how I can put a nice little bow on all of this, my writer friends. Whether or not you feel okay about putting an end date stamped on your project, there's the kitty. Hello, secret kitty. Whether or not you feel okay about putting a stamped end date for this project, what you can do yourself a huge favor by doing, what you can do that will really make your project more likely to get finished, is to know what the steps are for each part of that project and to keep track of which ones you've accomplished. And that is something that will make your brain feel good regardless, because every time something gets done, you get to check it off. When you're going to sleep and your brain's like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, you go, shh, brain, we've done 5. I know there are still 105, but you're just going to keep working through them. There's not an infinite number. It'll all happen. It will all happen, won't it, Bradbury? Yes, it will all happen. Okay. So let's keep the conversation going. Let me know your thoughts about setting deadlines. If you have strategies that work, please do share them. If you use a planner or something, definitely let us know what that looks like. If you're feeling lost, confused, stuck about how to set a deadline or how to finish a project, let us know that too. I've talked about a couple of resources. I have blog recipes available for you if blogging is what you're working on, and that will help you know the stages. I've also got a blog checklist too that you can find over at meganbarnhart.com, or just leave a comment that you're interested in that. Recipe for outlining, recipe for drafting, both available on my website and on Amazon if you need the steps of what it looks like to make your outline and draft. And if you're like, well, I need the steps for revising, I got a whole course on it. So got you covered at every stage of the writing process. And I think that means it's time to end when the cat walks across your lap. Okay, that's the old folk tale, right? Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I wish you happy deadline setting or happy project breaking down so that you can actually finish your writing and share it with the world and bring joy to others. So as always, I wish you happy writing.